Hello, miladies of inestimable value. Silence is not the absence of power, it's its most terrifying form. When a Sigma female stops trying to be social, the world around her doesn't just lose a voice, it loses a compass. Studies in psychology reveal that people are deeply unsettled when someone refuses to play the social game, because it breaks the invisible script everyone else depends on. And here's the twist. The Sigma female doesn't just break the script. She throws the whole play out the window and lets the audience wonder if the show is even still on. Her withdrawal isn't laziness, moodiness, or some quiet girl trope. It's an intentional shift that rewires the entire dynamic without her lifting a finger. What looks like her disappearing is actually the moment she becomes the loudest presence in the room. And the funniest part? While everyone else is busy gossiping, speculating, and tripping over themselves to figure her out, she's probably at home in pajamas, drinking tea, and building a life so sharp and self-contained that no crowd could ever compete. This is what really happens when a Sigma female stops trying to be social. And trust me, it's not what most people think. Number 1. She becomes a social Rorschach test. When a Sigma female stops trying to be social, she unknowingly turns into a walking Rorschach test. Her silence and lack of performance don't come with an explanation, and that blank space makes people uncomfortable. So they do what humans always do when faced with the unknown. They project themselves onto it. Suddenly, she's no longer just herself. To some, she becomes intimidating. To others, she's mysterious. And to a few, she's downright rude. None of these labels actually belong to her. They're simply reflections of the people looking at her. Someone insecure about being overlooked will accuse her of acting superior. Someone threatened by independence will call her cold or antisocial. Someone hungry for depth will see her as fascinating and enigmatic. The same woman doing the exact same thing becomes 10 different characters depending on who's watching. That's the strange power of not trying. She exposes people without even meaning to. The real brilliance is that she doesn't have to say a word. By removing her effort to blend in or soften her edges, she holds up a mirror that others can't avoid. Their reactions reveal more about their own fears, egos, and needs than they'd ever admit out loud. Her silence acts like a diagnostic tool for the social environment. It shows who can handle authenticity and who crumbles without performance to reassure them. What's even more interesting is how quickly the labels contradict each other. One person swears she's arrogant, another insists she's shy, while someone else claims she's deep and spiritual. She can't possibly be all those things at once, but the projections stack up anyway. It proves that people aren't actually seeing her. They're only seeing themselves reflected back. And the Sigma female? She doesn't bother correcting them. She knows that trying to fix people's perceptions would mean stepping back into the game she's chosen to leave behind. Instead, she lets them talk, project, and reveal themselves. Because at the end of the day, her silence isn't empty. It's a mirror, and not everyone likes what they see staring back. Number 2, her withdrawal creates rumors that sell themselves. When a Sigma female withdraws, she doesn't need to explain herself. Others will do it for her. Human nature hates a gap, and her absence feels like a hole that must be filled. So instead of accepting the simplest truth, that she's perfectly fine without the crowd, people start spinning their own stories. Suddenly, she's mad at someone, going through something, or thinking she's too good for us. The irony is that her silence makes more noise than her actual presence ever could. This is the kind of gossip that doesn't need fuel. It grows on its own, because people are far more comfortable inventing drama than admitting they're unsettled by someone who refuses to play the game. Her withdrawal disrupts the rhythm of the group, so they scramble to make sense of it in the only way they know how, by turning her choice into a story they can control. And that story often says more about their insecurity than about her. The truth is, nothing terrifies people more than realizing someone doesn't need their validation. When she stops showing up, it confronts them with the uncomfortable idea that social interaction, the very thing they cling to for identity, might not be necessary at all. Instead of facing that, they choose the easier path, labeling her as cold, mysterious, or even troubled. That way, they can comfort themselves by pretending her silence is a weakness instead of the strength it really is. What makes it even funnier is that she doesn't have to lift a finger. While others are busy analyzing, speculating, and whispering, she's simply minding her business. Her withdrawal becomes an unintentional marketing strategy. Her name circulates more in her absence than it ever did when she was actually present. And while they're busy talking, she's busy living. Her silence is the ultimate paradox. The less she gives, the more people demand explanations. And the more they demand, the more they reveal just how addicted they are to her presence. That's why her withdrawal doesn't shrink her influence. It multiplies it, because rumors always travel faster than the truth. Number 3. She enters selective resonance mode. When a Sigma female stops trying to be social, she doesn't fade into the background like people expect. She shifts into something far more powerful: selective resonance. This means she no longer scatters her energy across every interaction, every small talk, or every group dynamic. Instead, she operates on her own rare frequency, and only those who are truly aligned with it can connect with her. It's not about volume, charm, or effort anymore. It's about raw compatibility. Most people rely on effort to stay visible. They push themselves into conversations. They maintain surface-level friendships, and they keep up appearances because they're afraid of being forgotten. The Sigma female has no such fear. Once she pulls back, she isn't trying to attract anyone at all. And ironically, that's when the right people start showing up. The ones who approach her aren't doing it out of convenience or boredom. They're pulled in because something in them resonates with her quiet intensity. They can't explain it, but they feel it. Her silence functions like a natural filter. The shallow, the needy, the fake, they don't last. They either get bored or offended by her lack of effort and drift away, which is exactly what she wants. What remains are the rare connections that don't need to be forced, the ones strong enough to cut through her silence. These bonds are few, but they're unshakable because they're built on genuine alignment rather than social performance. Selective resonance also changes how people perceive her. In a world addicted to noise and attention-seeking, her refusal to perform makes her stand out without trying. She isn't flooding the space with words, jokes, or charm, yet people notice her absence like a missing frequency in a song. It creates tension, intrigue, and curiosity. People feel her presence precisely because she's not trying to push it. This shift is both liberating and intimidating. Liberating for her because she no longer bends herself to fit social expectations. Intimidating for others because they realize they can't earn her time through persistence or pretense. They either naturally resonate with her wavelength or they don't. And the Sigma female doesn't chase, she lets the silence do the sorting. Number 4. The energy vampires starve. When a Sigma female pulls back, the people who treated her calm presence like an invisible charging port suddenly find themselves unplugged. Those energy vampires, the ones who skim everyone's reserves without giving anything back, depend on a steady, low-effort supply of reassurance, stability, and quiet validation. Remove that supply and watch them scramble. They try louder voices, flashier personalities, and obvious drama to refill the gap. The move from subtle leeching to full-on desperation exposes them faster than any confrontation ever could. These people don't adapt by becoming better. They adapt by finding someone else to feed off. They flock to the loud extroverts, latch onto the most reactive person in the room, or manufacture crises just to get emotional oxygen. Their behavior looks petty and frantic, because it is. Their survival strategy is social parasitism. And once the host stops cooperating, their true colors show. The result is unmasking, not just of the parasites themselves, but of the entire social economy that let them thrive. What's savage and beautiful about her withdrawal is how clean the reveal is. There's no drama on her side, no point-by-point takedown. She simply refuses to be the battery pack. That refusal forces others into either two choices: step up and offer real reciprocal presence, or scramble off stage and expose their dependence. Most choose the latter, and everyone nearby sees it. The people who desperately renovate themselves to be noticed are suddenly easy to read. They become caricatures, loud, needy, and a little ridiculous. And that contrast makes the Sigma female's absence feel less like loss and more like detox. Meanwhile, the few who genuinely care show up differently. They don't panic. They demonstrate steadiness without needing to siphon energy. Those people become obvious because their actions are measured and reciprocal. That's the side effect the energy vampires can't stand. Her withdrawal improves the quality of the room by kicking out the freeloaders and leaving only those who actually know how to give. It's ruthless in its efficiency and profoundly clarifying. In short, when she stops powering the room, the weak find new prey, and everyone finally sees who's been surviving on other people's warmth. Number 5. She enters observer mode and sees too much. When a Sigma female slips into observer mode, the entire social dynamic shifts without anyone realizing it. While others are busy overanalyzing her withdrawal, she's doing the exact opposite. She's analyzing them. Detachment gives her a kind of X-ray vision. Without the noise of trying to fit in, entertain, or respond, her mind sharpens to the point where she starts noticing everything that most people miss. The alliances suddenly become obvious. Who laughs too hard at whose jokes, who leans on whose approval, and who quietly resents the people they pretend to admire. She picks up on the subtle glances, the delayed reactions, the way someone's smile doesn't reach their eyes. Every micro-expression becomes data, every slip of tone becomes evidence. People think she's withdrawn, but in reality, she's gathering a level of insight that makes her more socially powerful than before. And here's the unnerving part. Her silence makes others crack. Without her steady presence, some people buckle, the ones who relied on her calmness as a stabilizer. Their insecurity rises to the surface because they don't know how to hold themselves without her energy quietly holding the balance. The more detached she becomes, the more transparent they get. Her detachment is like sharpening a blade. She doesn't confront, she doesn't expose, she doesn't even hint. She just sees. And once you see the truth behind people's masks, you can't unsee it. That's where her real leverage lies. Others may think they're fooling everyone with their fake confidence or shallow bonding, but she's already dissected the entire game before they finish their act. The scary part for those around her is that she doesn't need to use the information right away. She stores it. Her observer mode builds an archive of truths about people, their real motives, their weak points, their contradictions. When she does choose to act, it's surgical, precise, and devastating because she already knows where the cracks are. While the crowd scrambles to interpret her silence, the Sigma female is interpreting them. That's the paradox of her withdrawal. They think she's disconnected. But in reality, she's more connected than ever, just not in a way that flatters anyone's illusions. Number 6. She forces authentic interactions. When a Sigma female stops trying to be social, she stops cushioning the experience for others. She's no longer softening her edges, filling awkward silences, or giving people the reassurance that keeps surface-level interactions alive. What's left is her raw, unpolished self, and that's the point. Without effort on her part, only the people who can handle her authenticity will step forward. Everyone else either backs away, gets uncomfortable, or quietly disappears. Her withdrawal acts like a natural filter. Those who were only around because she made things easy, warm, or entertaining won't survive the shift. They'll interpret her quietness as disinterest, coldness, or even arrogance, and they'll drift. But the ones who stay, they're not intimidated by her silence. They don't need constant validation or exaggerated performance to feel comfortable. They're willing to meet her where she is, without masks, without scripts, without expectations. That's where the value lies. By refusing to perform socially, she burns off the shallow connections the same way acid strips cheap metal. What's fake can't withstand the exposure. What remains are people who are not only genuine, but also strong enough to exist in a space where authenticity is the only currency. Those relationships are fewer, but they're richer, stronger, and more enduring because they were never propped up by effort in the first place. This is unsettling for many because most social circles run on performance. People bond over politeness, filler conversations, or pretending to be more interested than they actually are. The Sigma female's withdrawal exposes how fragile those bonds really are. She refuses to feed them, and in doing so, forces others to show whether they were there for her, or for the easy energy she once provided. The irony is that by doing less, she gains more. She doesn't chase connections, yet the ones that remain are real. She doesn't force belonging, yet she ends up surrounded only by those who belong without force. In a world addicted to masks, her silence demands truth, and most people can't handle that, but the rare few who can become the only ones worth keeping. Number 7. She stops diluting herself with noise. When a Sigma female stops trying to be social, she stops shrinking herself to fit into conversations that were never designed to hold her weight. Social settings demand bite-sized pieces of personality, small talk, polite jokes, agreeable nods, all the things that keep interactions light and easy. But for her, that constant trimming of her depth is exhausting. It feels like cutting a complex novel into a single tweet just to be understood. Once she withdraws, the dilution ends. She no longer edits her thoughts into neat, palatable fragments for the comfort of others. Instead, she lives in her full intensity, and that kind of presence is rare, raw, and overwhelming. Most people can't consume it without choking because they're used to watered-down versions of truth and personality. She refuses to be digestible anymore, and that's where her power grows. Her withdrawal isn't about hiding. It's about refusing to perform at half capacity. It's like she finally lets herself occupy the space she was always holding back from. And in that space, her depth multiplies. Her insights get sharper, her energy more concentrated, her creativity richer. She's no longer scattering her essence across meaningless chatter. She's investing it in herself, her work, her passions, her own growth. For others, this shift is unsettling. They realize the person they thought they knew was only a fraction of her true self, a version carefully compressed to keep the room comfortable. The withdrawal feels intimidating because it strips away that comfort. What they now see is someone unapologetically whole, and it forces them to confront just how much they expect others to dilute themselves in order to belong. The beauty of it is that she doesn't care if most people can't handle her intensity. She isn't interested in being manageable. The ones who can stay in her orbit without flinching are rare, but they're also the only ones worth having around. By stepping back from social performance, she doesn't lose connection. She gains authenticity. And the rest? They're left gasping, not because she vanished, but because she finally showed them just how little of herself she had been giving before. Number 8. She starts drawing in the wrong kind of fascination. When a Sigma female withdraws, people expect her to fade into irrelevance. But that's not what happens. Instead, her absence becomes a spark for the wrong kind of fascination. The less accessible she is, the more certain personalities spiral into obsessive curiosity about her. They can't stand not knowing why she pulled away, where she goes, or what she's doing when she's not feeding the social machine. Withdrawal creates mystery, but not the romantic kind, the unsettling kind. For people who rely on predictability, her silence feels like a puzzle they can't solve, and that lack of control gnaws at them. So they start watching more closely, listening for scraps of information, and speculating wildly. Some even turn stalker-like, not out of genuine interest in her as a person, but out of compulsion to decode what they can't understand. This obsession says more about them than it does about her. They aren't drawn to her because she's special in their eyes. They're drawn because her withdrawal exposes their own lack of self-containment. They need to fill every gap, explain every silence, and anchor every uncertainty. And she represents the one thing they can't pin down. That's why they latch onto her absence harder than they ever clung to her presence. What makes this dynamic so twisted is that the Sigma female isn't even trying to attract attention. She's not staging her withdrawal for effect. She's simply living without needing the noise. Yet this very act creates an aura that invites fixation. To some, she becomes a mystery they must crack. To others, she turns into a challenge, the one person they can't quite reach or impress. That gap drives their curiosity into obsession. For her, it's both ironic and inconvenient. She steps back to reclaim her space, yet ends up pulling in the kind of fascination she never asked for. The obsession doesn't flatter her. It reveals how much some people are addicted to control and narrative. By disappearing, she unintentionally hands them a mirror, and instead of facing their own emptiness, they chase her shadow. Number 9. Her absence exposes everyone else's dependence. When a Sigma female removes herself from the social equation, the effect is far more disruptive than people expect. At first, it might feel like nothing, just one less voice in the room. But as the days stretch, the absence grows heavier. People begin to notice that conversations feel thinner, moods shift quicker, and the air doesn't have the same balance it used to. The weight isn't in her silence. It's in the fact that everyone suddenly realizes how much they leaned on her without ever acknowledging it. Her presence isn't loud or showy, but it's stabilizing. She carries a kind of grounding energy that keeps the room from tipping into chaos. When she's there, people feel freer to be themselves, even if they don't consciously know why. Remove her, and the cracks start showing. The ones who relied on her quiet validation feel restless. The ones who mirrored her calmness now fidget. The ones who borrowed confidence from her subtle reassurance find themselves scrambling to replace it. This is when the uncomfortable truth sets in. She wasn't just there. She was holding more of the emotional weight than anyone realized. And the dependency wasn't balanced. While she never needed their noise or approval, they desperately needed her grounding. Her withdrawal forces them to confront that imbalance. Some respond with irritation, calling her distant or cold, because it's easier to blame her for stepping back than to admit they were leaning too heavily on her presence. Others try to replace her energy by amplifying their own voices, but it rings hollow, exposing how performative it really is. And then there are the few who quietly respect the gap she leaves, realizing that her absence reveals a depth they hadn't appreciated when she was around. The truth is, her silence doesn't make the room emptier, it makes everyone else's emptiness visible. It shows who can stand on their own and who only feels whole when plugged into someone else's energy. That's why her absence isn't just felt, it's exposing. It doesn't weaken her, it reveals how much weaker others were without her steadying presence. Number 10. Her emotional gravity turns unbearable. When a Sigma female is social, she often does more than people realize. She doesn't dominate the room with noise, but she balances it with presence. Her subtle empathy smooths out tension, her calmness steadies the group, and her quiet attentiveness creates a kind of unspoken safety. It's not loud enough to grab attention, but it's powerful enough to keep the atmosphere breathable. People rarely notice it when it's there. They just feel strangely comfortable without knowing why. But the moment she withdraws, that hidden gravity disappears. The shift is subtle at first, but it quickly becomes unbearable. Conversations feel heavier, interactions turn more awkward, and the usual flow of things seems slightly off. It's not chaos, but it's dissonance, like music missing its bass line. People can't put their finger on it, but the missing balance is her absence. This is where the irony lies. She never had to say much or do much to affect the room, but when she steps back, the void she leaves behind becomes impossible to ignore. People may try to cover it with louder voices, more jokes, or forced energy, but instead of lightening the mood, those attempts feel artificial. The natural grounding effect she once provided isn't something that can be faked. Her emotional gravity isn't about being warm and bubbly, it's about being steady. She absorbs tension without fanfare, diffuses insecurity without performance, and creates harmony simply by existing fully in the moment. Remove that stabilizer, and people start fidgeting. They feel unsettled, but can't articulate why. They blame the room, the vibe, or even themselves, never realizing it's the absence of her quiet contribution. What makes this even more striking is that she doesn't withdraw to punish anyone. She pulls back because she needs the space. Yet in doing so, she reveals just how dependent others were on her unseen balance. Her silence isn't passive. It changes the emotional weight of the environment. Without her, the air feels thicker, the interactions more fragile. And that's the ultimate proof of her influence. She doesn't have to raise her voice to shift the room. She only has to step away. Number 11. Her retreat sparks hidden resentment. When a Sigma female retreats, she doesn't announce it or justify it. She simply stops carrying the weight of everyone else's comfort. And that's when hidden resentment starts bubbling up. The people who leaned on her effort without ever admitting it suddenly feel exposed. They were used to her being the quiet stabilizer, the one who smoothed over awkwardness, remembered the unspoken details, or kept the energy balanced without asking for anything in return. When she pulls that away, they don't feel abandoned. They feel naked. Instead of acknowledging their dependence, they twist the story. They start calling her cold, aloof, or difficult. But the labels are nothing more than projection. What they really mean is, she won't keep carrying my emotional laziness anymore. They resent her because her withdrawal forces them to face how much they relied on her invisible labor. It's easier for them to villainize her than admit they were taking without giving. This passive-aggressive framing often shows up in subtle digs, a sarcastic comment about her being antisocial, a backhanded remark about how she thinks she's too good, or a pitying suggestion that she must be unhappy. None of it reflects her reality. It's all about them trying to cover their own discomfort with blame. What they don't realize is that resentment exposes them more than it damages her. By reacting with bitterness, they reveal just how fragile their sense of belonging is without her to prop it up. They show that their comfort in the social circle was never self-generated. It was borrowed from her presence. Her withdrawal doesn't make her cold. It exposes how warm she had been all along in ways they never acknowledged. The Sigma female doesn't waste energy defending herself against these quiet accusations. She knows that anyone who resents her for pulling back was never truly invested in her, only in what she provided. And that's the beauty of her retreat. It doesn't just give her space. It forces the truth out of others, whether they like it or not. Number 12. Her value becomes a private secret. When a Sigma female withdraws, something interesting happens. She stops being a public presence and starts becoming a private treasure. The few people who still have access to her realize just how rare that access is. While everyone else is left speculating, gossiping, or quietly missing her grounding energy, those closest to her experience something different. They get the unfiltered version, the depth, the wit, the warmth, the intensity. And once they see what others no longer have, they begin guarding it like a luxury item. They won't brag about knowing her anymore. They won't casually drop her name into conversations to boost their own social standing. Why? Because her value shifts the moment she pulls back from the crowd. She becomes scarce, and scarcity makes people protective. They stop advertising her existence because the fewer who know, the more special their access feels. It's not about ownership. It's about privilege. In fact, those who know her well start treating her presence the way people treat a rare vintage wine or a secret speakeasy, too precious to share with just anyone. They understand that not everyone deserves her energy, and they prefer keeping her circle small. It's not selfishness, it's recognition of quality. The irony is that she doesn't engineer this dynamic. She's not trying to make herself rare or play hard to get. She withdraws for her own reasons: clarity, peace, autonomy. But the byproduct is a shift in perception. Suddenly, being in her orbit isn't casual anymore, it's exclusive. And exclusivity always creates a quiet form of reverence. Meanwhile, those who lost access often try to reframe her as distant or unapproachable. But the ones who remain close know the truth. She's not distant at all. She's just selective, and that selection process makes her presence even more valuable. They savor conversations, moments, and connections with her because they know they're not replaceable. Her value becomes a private secret, not because she demanded it, but because scarcity transformed her into something people instinctively protect. In her absence, she stops being common ground. She becomes rare ground, and only a few are allowed to stand on it. A Sigma female's withdrawal is never just silence. It's a recalibration that exposes, reshapes, and redefines the entire social dynamic around her. What looks like absence is actually presence in its most concentrated form. By stepping back, she reveals who depended on her stability, who only thrived on her effort, who can survive her intensity, and who collapses without her quiet grounding. Her retreat filters the shallow from the genuine, the parasitic from the authentic, leaving only what can stand on its own. The beauty, and the threat, lies in the fact that she doesn't need to explain, justify, or defend it. She doesn't withdraw to punish, but her silence punishes pretenders all the same. She doesn't chase connection, yet the right people are magnetized toward her. She doesn't raise her voice, yet her absence is louder than any performance. In a world addicted to noise, distraction, and validation, the Sigma female's refusal to dilute herself is radical. Her withdrawal is not weakness, it is her fullest strength. Because when she stops trying to be social, she reminds everyone of a truth they'd rather avoid. Power doesn't always speak. Sometimes it simply steps back and still commands the entire room. If you found this breakdown as eye-opening as it was raw, don't just keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button and join the community where we dig deeper than surface-level takes. Smash the like button if you got value, drop a comment to share your perspective, and don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us keep creating content that cuts through the noise and tells the truth no one else will.